Welcome back to New Day. We are now going to look at something very, business-like. It's something that we've been talking about since 2008, actually. It's the Economic Partnership Agreements, and you're probably wondering what exactly are these agreements. Well, they are a scheme to create a free trade area, that's what we call the FTA, between the European Union and the African, Caribbean, and Pacific group of states. Well, we've been going up and down, back and forth with the EPA for a very long time. Until last week, a member of the EU actually mentioned that indeed the ratification will happen sometime this year. Well, two gentlemen, Paul Frimpong, chartered economist and African affairs analyst, is here, and also Sylvester Bagoro.
Yes, please.
Program Officer, Political Economy Unit, Third World Network, Africa. He's also here. We're going to analyze the EPA and its benefits for Africa. I'll come to you, the economist, first. What do we stand to gain as a bloc from the EPA?
Yeah, good morning. I think the EPA is basically a trade liberalization process. This is a program that's been instigated by the European Union, by the European Commission. It's basically to create a market for ACP countries, because these are countries that are deemed being poor. There's no much trade going on between these countries. They don't have a say in terms of determining global market price of their raw materials that they export. So the European Commission, trying to make ties with their ex-colonial countries, they try to make sure that these countries will have a say in terms of determining global market prices, have access to over 500 million people, that is the European Union, 27 countries coming together, and then also to help them improve trade among these countries. And the approach of the European Union is that these countries are supposed to come in blocks. So they are coming in about 6 blocks. We have the EAC with the East African Community, we have the SADC from the Southern Africa, we have the COMESA, Common Market for Eastern and Southern African countries, we have the ECOWAS, of course, which is what we are going to discuss here. So you're supposed to come in that block. So ECOWAS will be led by the ECOWAS Executive Commission, so they will come and negotiate on behalf of the ECOWAS member countries. And now the benefit, as I said, is to have access to larger markets, European markets, over 500 million population. So that's basically, so you liberalize your trade regime, you make sure that you can export almost everything to European markets for free without paying any charge. So that's basically the benefit that you want to bring to the regional bloc.
Okay, and do you have any qualms with this?
I do, and I want to start by just saying that we've had some of these policies over and over again as Africans. We have some now that you call the aid model. This was 1947. The Americans set out a $15 billion account to be accessed by European countries. That's from post Second World War II. So these countries were very, very fragile. So these countries were supposed to tap into the $15 billion set out by the Americans to develop to a certain level. Then they can generate their own money. It helped them in 1947. And then in 1960s, 1970s, post-independent, post-colonial Africa. So a lot of these countries were also coming from independent colonial rule. So they were very fragile, very, very fragmented. They were not strong economically. So there was a model there, the aid model, where countries from Africa can have access to this money, help them invest, drive development, and the poverty reduce. So the strategy was that there must be savings. The savings will drive investment. Investment will drive growth, and then poverty will reduce. That was the strategy. So this aid model came in 1960s. Most countries in Africa jump onto this model. So they signed deals. Now, look at what we are saying. Over 60 years of aid money, we are still where we are. Poverty has rather increased instead of reducing. That's one aspect of it. Then we came to the Structural Adjustment Program, which also happened in the 1980s. Most countries jump onto it to sign the Structural Adjustment Program. So you go for a loan, liberalize your market, government should reduce its intervention in the market, you reduce on your expenditure, then some of these big countries with their big companies will come in and flood your market. That's what happened. And so the ECOWAS, again with this EPA, that's the same thing which is going to happen. You are looking at a policy, a program, which is going to suffocate the small and medium enterprise that we have in this country because they cannot survive. Here we are going to allow these countries, big countries, their big companies to flood into our market with their goods, it cannot compete. So that's basically one of the major things that I have against the EPA agreement. Because you had this before under the aid model, which you still have now. Most countries now depend about 60% or 70% of their budget being supported by this aid model. It's not helping. It helps government to abdicate their responsibilities. They do not develop their internal market. They do not develop their private sector. And then we have a challenge going forward. So I think that's one issue that I have with this EPA, with the ECOWAS region.
Okay, so guys, so let me come to you. What's the position of the Third World Network on the EPA? I know that for a very long time, Third World has been raising critical issues about this EPA. In fact, I remember with the EPA Light, you held press conferences to talk about it. What's your position, since it looks like this year it will be happening?
I talk on behalf of Third World Network, and in addition to what we call the Economic Justice Network. So we have the trade unions, we have the farmer-based organizations, and students, all that. Now, if you look at just as he said, the EPA is a free trade agreement between ECOWAS and the European Union. And then, to put in the simple terms, it means that the goods just come into Ghana or within the ECOWAS region, just like you are bringing goods from Tema to Accra. So that the European goods will just come in, just as we are bringing goods from Tema to Accra, no barriers. And we also have access to that. But even as if you look at since 2007, there has been a deadlock in the negotiations, and the ECOWAS Commission, they raised a number of issues with them. One, in terms of what they call the market access, it means open up to a certain level. So market access, studies have shown that if you go beyond 60%, then you're actually killing your local producers. And so ECOWAS moved from 60 to 65. There's another dimension to the EPA. The ECOWAS Commission also the first to agree with the European Union on what they call the most favored nation clause. What does that mean? What does that mean?
To that clause.
What it means is that whatever trade agreement we enter into within another country in the future, which offers better concessions than what we are offering the EU, then the EU automatically qualifies. What does it mean? It means that if you want to enter into a trade agreement with Brazil or China or India, and it offer better concession to Brazil or India, then the EU automatically qualifies. What it tries to say that we want to put the EU in what they call a pole position ahead of other competitors, so they have control over the African market in terms of raw materials, in terms of finished products. Don't forget the EU, they import a lot of raw materials, and then they export the manufactured products. And so they want to have a very pole position in terms of controlling raw materials and markets across Africa. That's one aspect. There is another dimension, which is in the worst of all, what we call the rendezvous clause. Rendezvous means that we agree to negotiate other areas, such as government procurement, services, insurance, and all that, shipping, and all that. So that's what the EU is pushing for. So if you look at the current compromise they've reached with the Commission, they have a rendezvous clause in there. And the European Union is looking at how they can take control of our services sector, how they can take control of shipping, the air transport, and all that. And that's the worst form of the agreement, where you go into procurement. And so, just as the President delivered the State of the Nations address, and they pointed out a number of issues like how you can grow local businesses and all that, so that you can control imports. If you go into an international treaty, which opens up your domestic sector with sanction regime, it will be difficult for you to discriminate in favor of local producers. And so you want a space within which you can say, look, I think for this area, my local people, local companies should have control, and so I can discriminate. So in terms of procurement, let's buy from local people. Once you enter into EPA, you cannot discriminate in terms of purchasing for local companies or foreign companies. It means you must create a level field for everyone. And so we think that as a development economy, a development region, the best thing for us is make sure we have the space within which we can develop, and so you don't go into international treaty. Let me also say that there's another dimension. If you don't sign, there's other. If you don't sign onto the EPA, we have what I call the non-traditional exports. Not exports. Now, the UN Economic Commission, they've done a study clearly indicating what we gain and what we lose in terms of that. So, for instance, if Ghana fails to sign, we have about 70% of our products still going to the EU. Don't forget, the EU is a big market in terms of raw materials. So your cocoa beans will say go duty-free, quota-free. Our timber, our gold, all the things that we don't add value, we just send to the EU, go duty-free. The only product we have will be the vegetables and tuna products, and then cocoa butter. Mm-hmm. These products. Now, the Commission for Africa has estimated that even with these products, the marginal increment in terms of tariff will be about $59 million a year. So now, and then the tariff revenue you will lose when you sign is about $378 million a year. So even from that narrow point of view, why wouldn't you just compensate these companies and ask them to diversify the export destinations for the next 3 years, just as Namibia is doing? Namibia is doing the same thing. Instead of going, so you sacrifice your regional market, you sacrifice your domestic market, you actually tie your hands up that you cannot.
Okay, let me ask both of you. It doesn't look like you're both in favor of the EPA, but do we have any alternatives, any other real development alternatives?
That's the alternative
that's one of them. But apart from this, I mean, for those who are in favor of the EPA, they will tell you that, well, it doesn't really sound viable enough.
You are when you are talking about an economic policy, now you're talking based on failing. It's not about failing. There are studies, whether from the African Union Commission, whether from the ECA, whether from the ECOWAS, even Ghana Ministry of Trade and Industry, they've done the studies. Now, all things is open to it. The best thing we can do in order to save the region, because if you look at what the compromise they reach in Dakar, they're saying they want to save regional integration.
Okay.
Now, regional integration doesn't mean a regional treaty. There's no substance in the agreement when you collapse your local producers. And so there's no substance, it's an empty shell. And so you want to make sure that the companies within the region, they have control over the domestic market and all that. So that's key in terms of industrialization. And even as I said, if you look at the light manufacturing sector, how do you sacrifice your light manufacturing sector for a regional for a treaty? That it raises a lot of questions. And then the other aspect in terms of alternative, we're saying that look, we can actually set up what they call a regional fund. You can set a regional fund to compensate countries like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Cape Verde. I mean, these are developing countries. The rest are, and in Nigeria, the rest are LDCs. I mean, they have what they call everything but arms. It means that without the EPA, Togo, Benin, all the other Mali and all that, they can still trade with the EU on better terms. The only countries that fail are Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, and Cape Verde, because these are developing countries. Okay. Now, so to come out with something that can protect these countries, let us set up a regional fund. We can set a regional fund so you compensate these countries and ask them to diversify their export destination for within the next 3 years. That is a bold step a government can take.
But you would have thought that these interventions you're talking about would not be like rocket science. It's something we could do easily, or isn't it? Is it
in 2011, when the what they call the Ministerial Monitoring Committee meeting, we had a meeting here, and our own Minister Hannah Tete was the one who chaired the meeting. They came up with this idea of setting up a solidarity fund, a fund that can actually compensate these companies. That's a brilliant idea from the ECOWAS Commission, because it was a strategy to counter what they call the strategy of the EU, because they keep on saying that Ghana, if you don't sign, then your export will be disrupted. That is a lie, in the sense that they just said if this product enters the EU 1 CD, outside EPA, then it's going to be 1 CD 20 pesos. So the 20 pesos, they just said 20. That's a marginal increment. So why wouldn't you take care of the marginal increment and let them diversify? That's one aspect of it. When they took the decision, of course, the member countries, instead of Ghana leading the way in terms of pushing for that, we kept on saying that, look, if the regional process delays, then we'll go back to our interim agreement. Then ECOWAS said, look, if you allow Ghana to disintegrate the region, then we'll have a problem. And so when we met in Dakar last month, the Senegalese president was saying that, look, they are going into the compromise because of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, that they would disintegrate the region. And I think that's a very bad signal for the region, because Ghana failed to show leadership in terms of it, because we were supposed to denounce our interim agreement, so we'll go back to the region and fight for our own interest. But we allow the whole region to be bulldozed into this.
Okay, let me come to you, Paul. He mentioned one intervention, and it's a very, very important point he made with that intervention. But apart from that, are there other alternatives to the EPA?
Yes, I'm actually an advocate of regional integration, where we can integrate our markets as a regional bloc.
But have we done that? I mean,
we've not done that.
ECOWAS allowed us to do free trade, but
I think the sub-region which is increasing on that front is the East African community, which is made up of 5 countries. They are really, really integrating their market. You go to Rwanda now, in 1st January 2013, you can move to Rwanda with any goods without any visa processing application or anything. So Rwanda is doing that, and which is helping the region. Now, I want to go back to this EPA and where it started from. I think in the 70s, there was a Lome Convention, where from this European Commission as well, European Union, where they try to liberalize trade among the ACP countries as well. Now, when you look at the objective set in the Lome Convention, they failed woefully. So, in the 1987, they came out with this new trade agreement between these ACP countries as well, and that was what was known as the Cotonou Agreement, which ended in 2007-2008. And then they came out with this interim economic partnership agreement, where in the ECOWAS region, 16 member countries, Cape Verde opted out, but Mauritania joined. And out of these 16 member countries, Ghana, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire are the only countries which are out of the least developed countries. So the 13 are classified as least developed countries. Fine. When you look at the structure of these countries, they are very, very fragile. Their markets are not strong. Okay, so they have small and medium enterprise as their means. Their capital direct investment is very, very slow. But look at the story from 1990s, 1980s, and the 2000s, the turn of the century. You realize that there's much more improvement on the continent that I've ever seen in history of this continent. So what I'm looking at is, why can't we put our feet down? This EPA is going to lead to deindustrialization, because first, the EPA strategy is tied to robust export of raw materials from this region. What it means is that the moment we sign on to this EPA, we are going to export robustly.
You both don't see anything positive with the EPA, do you? Sorry,
like I was saying, so robust exports are going to lead to deindustrialization. Now, so like you said, if what the president said that we are going to promote local industries, you can't do that when you sign on to this agreement, because you have to export your raw material robustly. You are going to import from all angles, and these are goods that are coming in. And there was one clause that I want to also mention called the clause of origin, where maybe Ghana has signed on to the EPA agreement, maybe Niger has not signed, so maybe we import tuna from Niger, we process into Canada, we want to export to the European country. That is forbidden. It means that you're going to limit Ghana's access to other markets outside the EPA, which is very, very wrong. So when you look at this clause and you still want to sign on to the EPA agreement, it's very wrong. So what I was saying is that the regional integration is very, very critical. And the regional integration, why can't we trade among ourselves? Trade among us stands around 10%. Why it stands about 60 to 70% of the rest of the world, which is very wrong. So why can't I export my goods to Togo? Why is that so? It's so difficult for me to do that, but it's very easy for me to export goods to an European country. Now, when we look at all this regional integration I'm talking about, the most problem we have is the infrastructure. And some of the infrastructure, we have the hard and the soft. Of course, it's very, very costly to construct rail from Ghana to Togo and around the region. But some of them are very, very soft, something that we can do without any problem. Look at bureaucracy that we see at our borders. You have to sign over 1,000 documents before you can get your goods across your border, which is very, very wrong. This is fundamental. These are everything that we can do to eliminate. Now, when you look at regional integration, when you go to Latin America, it's around 27%. When you go to East Asia, it's around 50%. When you go to the Europe, it's around 70%, because they are much more integrated. They have their union, everything working. Unfortunately for us, since 1963 that we started the AU and what have you, we still not reach anywhere in terms.
So you are for a vibrant regional integration.
That we can have a larger market, can export and import among us, we can improve trade among us, and we can move on from there.
All right. Now, out of that zone, do you see anything positive at all with the EPA?
Yeah.
Or is all gloomy?
Can I maybe in terms of the raw materials, if you want to continue to export raw materials, then you sign on to it, then your cocoa beans and then your other products, raw material, can actually go there duty free. That's positive.
Okay.
But in terms of industrialization, in terms of value added products, the regional market and the African market is what is good for us.
So you're also in favor of regional integration?
Yes. So what I'm coming to your point. So if your rule or what you want to do is to keep on exporting raw materials, then go for the European market. With exporting raw materials. But if you want to make sure you want to add value to your products and industrialize and create job for your people and all of,
then the EPA doesn't help us.
Then you need to protect the domestic market and also protect the regional market. That is it. In terms of raw material, you have China coming in, they are looking for raw materials. So on that score...
Yeah, I was going to come to that point, that China has become such a powerful trade partner.
Yes.
So it's not just about the EU any longer.
Yes, you see, China, what they did was that...
Paul, I'll come to you very soon.
They actually protected their economy and to such a time that they were able to open up.
Exactly.
So no one is arguing against trade liberalization. You open up according to your strength. So if you open up prematurely, what you do is that you actually collapse your local image. And this one is not.
And that is your fear.
And that's why even we have a lot of evidence, from the ECA and all that. And this one is what they call permanent liberalization. It's not autonomous. The liberalization you have today is mean that we have decided that we want to open up. Now, when you go into the EPA, it's permanent. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. It's permanent. And so when you as a developing country, it is wrong for us as a country to go into a permanent with sanction regime. So when you violate sanction, I think this country we are used to paying judgment debt. We will pay more judgment debts. The other aspect I wanted to do is that the European Union, after a lot of studies, have come to the certainty that their survival in the coming decades depend on raw materials and market. And so they are all over the place looking for free trade agreement with countries, so that they make sure that they secure the source of raw materials and all that across country. What is our strategy as a country and as a region, so that you go into you just basically accepting the EPA on the terms of the EU, and so it benefits the EU instead of us. So that's
Paul, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the China's influence in Africa now and why we should look at that side. There's been a new friend in Africa, which is China, of course. There's been improvement in trade between African countries and China. Starting from 2006, there's been a forum on China-African relations. So you go to Beijing, they've been Africa sometime. This is what is going on the continent. In the 1980s, the Chinese started a model which was being laughed at around the world. What they did was that they placed emphasis on economic development instead of political right. So there was priority on economic right and political right. So it means that they de-emphasized democracy and focused on economic development. Because what they believed was that economic development is a prerequisite for the growth of democracy in their region. So that's what they did. Now, there was strong state capitalism. There was capitalism, but the government was having an influence in the market. That's what happened. But in the West, there was private capitalism. So there's that schism going on. So there was a fight, kind of argument, economic terms. But in the last 30 years, China has risen to be the second largest economy in the world. And now this China is coming to Africa. It's a population of over 1 billion people looking for access to arable land to grow crops. They have lack of access to potable water, good water for their people, so they are coming to Africa. This is the region they can have access to water. Now, what they are coming to do is very simple. They are here for mutual benefit. They are here for development.
Is it mutual?
Mutual.
Is it really mutual?
It's not really mutual. There are issues there, but compared to what we have seen under the aid model, what we have seen under the structural adjustment program, where we liberalize our market, and now we've been flooded with goods from other markets that our industry cannot compete. That one is good than what we saw in the last 60 years of our engagement with the rest of the world. Now, China rose to be Africa's trading partner above USA in 2012 also. Yeah, so that's a new model. Now, what we do is that now when you look at the numbers, economic fundamentals are very, very good. You have rising middle class, which is loosely defined by the African Development Bank as people who live not less than $2 a day, which is rising. So we have a larger consumer market. That's an advantage that we have. We have a youth population, over 400 million people in Africa now, between the age of 15 and 25 years, which is very, very tremendous. It means that we have access to a very dynamic, strong labor force, which you can leverage on to do that. And this is what the Chinese did, the East Asians, led by the Chinese. That's what they did. And what they did was they opened up their market for investment. But they did something that they call spiderweb economics. What it means is that when you bring your money into the economy, you invest, we make sure that there are policies. And that policy is about 70 to 80% of your money will stay in the economy. The rest will go out. Mm-hmm. We are not seeing that. When you sign into the EPA agreement, you can't do that. You can't even direct your policies as to this is a sector we want you to you can export your goods, or we can import from, but you can just come in, export whatever you want to export into our region. We can also export our raw material into our region. So I think China has given us a choice that we can still maintain our.
So we are not necessarily tied to the EU.
We have an option. Yeah.
Let me run this by you, Sylvester. We understand that there are reports that we could lose up to $88.6 million annually and about $1.12 billion in import revenue by 2020. So, just so we reduce these losses, okay? If we don't ratify, if we don't sign up to this EPA, what do we stand? What are the ramifications for us?
If you don't sign on to the EPA, it means that the money that the import duties that you get mentioned, we will save them as a country. Okay. Because the goods coming in, we charge duties on them. So when you don't sign, you save your money.
So we are saving ourselves
money. You also save ourselves the space to develop, just like you mentioned. under the what they call the World Trade
But do
Organization.
we have the capacity?
You have the capacity to develop.
Exactly.
Unless until you begin to tell yourself you have the capacity to develop, you continue to import things. Okay, so we need as a country, we have local businesses across. We have engineers. We have local companies that are exporting within the domestic economy and the ECOWAS region. They are trying to come up, and so the best thing you can do is to support them to develop. That's all countries. That's what they've done. So if you sit down here, you don't have the capacity to develop, and you only keep on importing goods from Europe and going to a trade, what they call a treaty with them, that might be difficult in terms of development. No country has ever developed without protecting its own local companies.
That's absolutely true. Okay, you have the funding.
Yeah. I think we have the capacity to develop. I started by saying I like to give a background of where we are coming from to where we are now. In the 1980s, 1990s, economic growth was lower compared to population growth. So we have countries growing around 3%, 4%, and economic growth around 2% or 1.5%. In the turn of the century, the 21st century, we have seen a tremendous growth happen on the continent. Maybe when it's only Niger that they are growing at 4% in them. Economic growth is around 6%. We have just 2% margin, which is not very strong. But we've seen in Ghana for the past 2-3 years, we're growing around 7%. On the African region, we are growing around 5% compared to about 2.something% in the other part of the world, which is very good. It means that we've shown the potential. That's why we have this story about economic fundamental being good around the African region. That's the story we need to go there and tell the people. So with this fundamental being strong, we have the leverage, we have the economic leverage. Now, when we invite you to bring your money into our system, this is the point that we can stand on our toes and say that this is the sector we want you to invest in. So if you come to invest in agriculture in Ghana, we can tell you that maybe you have to go to the cotton sector, we have to go to the fishery sector. But if we don't see ourselves as rising to this level, then trust me, we cannot even dictate to any of this. So we have the capacity to develop, and this is the time we need to stand on our toes. Stop the sign of any form of trade agreement going to affect.
So yes or no, Sylvester? Sign up to EPA?
No to EPA.
No to EPA.
Okay, so that was Sylvester Bagro from the Third World Network, and also Paul Frimpong, a chartered economist and African affairs analyst.